and escorted back to their base for interrogation.
We've been hearing stories of this kind of brutality, but this is the first occasion on which we've actually witnessed it.
For those risking this dangerous journey, the delay could be deadly. A bleak choice between running out of food or braving the crossfire. Juliet Bremner, ITV News, near Basra.
I'm certainly not concerned in any way that the forces around Basra pose any threat to breaking out and defeating any of the ground that we have gained on the Al-Faw Peninsula. What I am concerned to do is to try to support the rebellion that appears to be taking place within Basra by the precise application of direct and occasionally indirect fire when it's safe to do so without causing any damage. What we're trying to achieve is supporting the rebellion without causing a lot of collateral damage, which is actually quite a fine judgment.
It's a very difficult thing to achieve, I would assume.
Yes, very difficult, because the enemy is choosing to place itself on the edge of built-up areas in amongst houses, and that makes it very difficult. We are in a sense tying our own hands in not using all the firepower available to us.
This is Qasr, a small town of 40,000 people. People slowly emerging from their homes, slowly starting to smile, starting to trust the forces here.
So what do you think of British soldiers here? Is a problem or no problem?
No problem. Very good.
It's good that.
But watch how nervous this teacher gets when I talk about Saddam Hussein.
Very good.
And you think it's good Saddam Hussein will go? You think it's good? Go.
Oliver Lee from 4-2 Commando of the Royal Marines told me Qasr is now secure. The fear remains though, and also a desperate need for food, water and electricity. If this is all about hearts and minds, there are old ones and young ones ready to be won here.
All through southern Iraq, the desperation of the people here soon became evident. In trucks and on foot they came to the town of Safwan. These people have been without food or water supplies since the war began. Now, they are desperate. Within seconds, the Kuwaiti aid workers who had organised this trip were overpowered by the mob. The townsfolk fighting each other for boxes of supplies. Adults robbing children.
These desperate scenes are exactly what the aid agencies wanted to avoid. This is survival of the fittest. Only the healthy and the strong can get to the food. The weak and the ill are left with nothing.
This woman told me her husband is diabetic. He can't get insulin and is too ill to come here. She and her children went home empty-handed.
My children want this food. They can't reach the food. They can't eat.
Despite this effort to help the Iraqi people, resentment is never far away.
We hate US, we hate British, England, we hate any state in war here.
What do you think about Saddam's regime?
Saddam's very good man.
As the supplies ran out, the mood swung from frantic to ugly. The lorry drivers were threatened. One of the buses in our convoy was held up at knife point.
The troops have moved into Safwan. We, as a consequence, have had to move out. It's simply too dangerous. This is a clear indication that despite the coalition reassurances that this part of Iraq is safe, and despite the aid being brought into the people here, it is still a very, very volatile area.
Tonight here, the strong are eating, the weak still go hungry. Martin Geisler, ITV News, Safwan, southern Iraq.
Water and medical supplies from British troops. They were also given medical treatment by military doctors.
Night for the first naval commando mission of the war. They had invaded across the desert. Now Marines and munitions were packed into 10 speedboats. Their target, Iraqis fleeing Basra and the remnants of Iraq's navy. By sunrise, with 4 hovercraft leading them in, they reached Iraq's main naval base. Heavily armed, they boarded gunboats, long abandoned by their crews, and with a single hammer began dismantling the Iraqi navy. These boats helped Saddam fight 3 wars. This will be their last. Pushing north, the Marines checked for sea mines and the Iraqis who might have laid them, but the bunkers are empty. Not so the hidden creeks of this polluted waterway. More gunboats dealt with in the same way. Saddam never had much of a navy. He's got even less of one tonight.
The Marines are now clearing this waterway all the way to the Basra line. Inside the besieged city, which is smouldering on the horizon, Iraqi troops are trapped by land and now by sea.
On the sandbanks, more smoking gunboats and more explosions. The arms and ammunition that kept Saddam's grip tight here is disappearing fast. The Royal Marines are destroying his power by land and by sea. Bill Neely, ITV News, with the Royal Marines on the Shat al-Basra in southern Iraq.
The vast US supply lines, 400 miles long, need consolidation. And it is possible that America won't move on Baghdad until Britain has control of Basra and the south. But, we were briefed today, reinforcements for Britain here aren't possible. We can only guess at the reasons why, but quite suddenly it's clear that senior officers here at the war front want to send the political message back to London via the media that if it comes to a situation where Britain wants to reinforce its troops here, they won't be able to because there aren't enough of them to go round because of the firefighters' strike. And so Britain probes slowly around the deserts of southern Iraq, facing tonight what their commander-in-chief called today a very considerable hearts and minds challenge.
Incoming!
British paratroops under fire in the Rumaila oil fields.
Right, boys, keep digging. Helmet's bloody armour on.
Moving forward to secure territory, a patrol from 3 para is targeted by Iraqi artillery.
Too far!
They fire back with their mortars. Such sporadic firefights seem now the pattern for this war, but the commanders insist it's not bogged down.
Armies cannot move forever without stopping from time to time to regroup, to ensure that their supplies are up, and even, believe it or not, soldiers need a bit of sleep from time to time. So this bogged down is a tendentious phrase. It's a pause whilst people get themselves sorted out for what comes next.
With America's promised reinforcements already streaming out of Kuwait, the war planners are on the defensive, trying hard to counter the growing view it's not going to plan. RAF Chinook helicopters ferry US Marines to the fighting near Nasiriyah. These reinforcements are expected soon to attack the Iraqi Republican Guard, who've stopped their advance on Baghdad. 4 Marines were reported missing in the area today, as America's Army commander on the ground, Lieutenant General William Wallace, candidly told reporters, the enemy we're fighting is a bit different from the one we war-gamed against. It seemed like the first honest admission America had seriously underestimated the Iraqis.
I don't think that we have. I know that there's a report out there. I've not gotten completely familiar with what General Wallace said. What I do know is that, again, our commanders talk to each other on a continuous basis, and a subordinate commander's assessment is always taken into account at the next higher headquarters and the headquarters above that.
While it's true war plans must be altered to meet changing circumstances, suspicion lingers the changes now run deeper than's admitted. And tonight it all suddenly got messier. The US Defense Secretary accusing Syria of arming Iraq.
We have information that shipments of military supplies have been crossing the border from Syria into Iraq, including night vision goggles. These deliveries pose a direct threat to the lives of coalition forces. We consider such trafficking as hostile acts and will hold the Syrian government accountable for such shipments.
It's a political bombshell with as yet unknown ramifications. Another unknown, Iraq's chemical weapons capability. The Americans today taking reporters to a hospital near Nasiriyah where they found chemical protection suits and respirators. Not proof the Iraqis intend to use them, whatever military spokesmen claim, but it makes soldiers preparing for the coming battle against the Republican Guard in the area just that bit more nervous.
Of wounded people, many of them taken to hospital, and what hospital officials are saying is that 51 people have been killed and 50 injured. Already Iraq's Ministry of Information has spoken out about this and has called it a cowardly crime.
التعليق على My comments on the situation right now as we're speaking to you, the situation in Baghdad is getting worse. There are consecutive coward attacks that hit civilian neighborhoods. One of these ugly crimes is launching one of their bombs on the Sharla neighborhood in Baghdad. The number of the casualties that we were able to pick up is over 52 martyrs. And I believe there will be more. The number of the injured is much higher. My explanation is that this is a heavy aggression on civilians to cover up for a series of defeat that our army caused them in the desert in different neighborhoods in Baghdad.
By coalition forces. As fresh explosions hit Baghdad tonight, Arabic television is showing these pictures from a Baghdad hospital. It claims the result of a US cruise missile attack on a crowded marketplace in the west of the city. Initial reports suggest at least 50 people may have been killed, a similar number injured. Eyewitnesses report a missile landing on the Al Nasser market in the city's Shula neighborhood. Iraqi officials claim the carnage was caused by a stray coalition bomb. The Allied command center in Qatar has yet to respond. It follows the death 2 days ago of at least 15 civilians in one of Baghdad's northern suburbs. Coalition commanders have suggested that a stray Iraqi missile may have been to blame for that attack. In the Iraqi capital today, it's been a heavy day of bombing, some of the most powerful of the war so far. Tonight, in the wreckage of a marketplace, Iraqi officials say the search is continuing for more dead and injured. Neil Connery, ITV News, Baghdad.
Seems to be having some effect. Very suddenly, the Iraqi army has abandoned important positions to the east of the oil city of Kirkuk and pulled back at least 20 miles. What was the front line has become a no man's land. We followed Kurdish soldiers as they moved cautiously down the empty road, trying to find out where the enemy has retreated to. We halted at a former Iraqi gun position and found ourselves looking down on the Kirkuk oil field, one of the great strategic prizes of this war. This is the furthest point that the Kurdish Peshmerga soldiers have reached, and it's about 10 miles from the outskirts of the city of Kirkuk, a city which is now visible through the mists over there behind me, still in Saddam Hussein's hands. In a village abandoned by the Iraqi army, the Kurds used a bulldozer to smash one of Saddam's monuments. But the unanswered question is whether the Iraqis will now stand and fight for Kirkuk. Julian Mannion, ITV News, at the front line in northern Iraq.
Region which is not far from the northern Iraqi city of Mosul. I've been here for many, many days now, and I think this is the heaviest bombing we've seen in terms of consecutive strikes against this area. It's been going on for the past several hours, and it really coincides with the stepping up of airstrike activity along two major parts of the northern front, one at Kalak on a road leading to Mosul, and another area southeast of where I am at Chamchamal, again bombing there. So really stepped up activity from the air in these two areas. Now also, as this goes on, we have seen today a further continuation of the 173rd Airborne Brigade's hold on an airfield which is about an hour's drive from the main city around here of Erbil. The 173rd came in a dramatic parachute drop into the Harir airfield, and since then they've been continuing security operations and building up equipment, working very closely with the Kurds in terms of what they will be doing next and how these two forces will be coordinating and liaising with each other. Again, we've also seen during the hours of darkness continued movements by this brigade. Half the brigade, we understand, on the ground now, and it is expected that more of the 173rd will be coming into northern Iraq, unloading equipment, setting up bases at airfields, and preparing them to take even bigger aircraft to bring in more men and equipment. Now, another development today has been the abandonment by the Iraqi army of a main Iraqi post on a hilltop on the main road from Chamchamal, southeast of where I am, to that oil-rich city of Kirkuk. the Iraqis pulled out and the Iraqi Kurdish forces moved into that area. Now, Iraqi Kurds have put all their fighters, which number in the tens of thousands, under the control of the US Central Command. So this was not an aggressive, hostile act by the Kurds. They simply filled the vacuum created by those departing Iraqi soldiers. And Zalmay Khalilzad, who's the US Special Envoy here, had a press conference earlier today in which he said, or made it quite clear, that the Kurdish move was not seen as anything that might tip the scales as far as Turkey sending its troops into northern Iraq because of possible Kurdish exploitation of the battlefield to expand their territorial control. Back to you, John Vaughn.
We could feel the vibrations from that explosion. That is downtown Kuwait City. We're looking at that skyline there where there are a number of hotels are based, as well as the commercial center of Kuwait City. But certainly a very loud, powerful blast just moments ago here in Kuwait City. Smoke now rising from downtown. As we monitor this situation, we are still working to find out what the cause of that explosion was. We have not heard air raid sirens, but we are now hearing the alarm in our building. So we do not know what the situation is. As Jonathan Mann mentioned earlier, there have been a number of air raid sirens heard in Kuwait City over the last few days, but nothing in the last 24 hours. Because US forces said they had taken out the mobile Scud launchers, or mobile missile launchers rather, that were responsible for most of those missiles that were coming into Kuwait. We do not know if this was a missile or an explosion. And Jonathan Mann, we may hand it back to you, as the alarms are now ringing in our building. So we may take some shelter in the basement here. So back to you, Jonathan.
Dug deep sleeping trenches today. They are preparing to stay put for an indefinite number of days to allow the supply line to catch up and be secured from attack.
The faster we are, the harder it is to keep logistics support up with us. So I think that's why we're probably waiting, is for the logistics trains, the supply route to catch up to us.
Some Marines feel vulnerable staying in one place. It is safer, they say, to keep moving.
We can do our missions, pick up, leave, get to another spot and do our mission, and they can't. By the time they have a chance to track where we are, we're already gone.
There have been sporadic battles all over this area. Although it is heavily defended, Marines are concerned the Iraqis now know exactly where they are.
And as they sit here, there are also concerns about the Marines' own weapons. Last night, a young Marine stepped on an unexploded grenade right here in this field. He died on the way to the hospital. And this afternoon, it happened again. And that Marine is in stable condition.
You really have to pay attention to what you do. Stay on tracks, stay on vehicle tracks when you move vehicles. If you move at night, then make sure you use thermals, and you just really have to be careful.
For a brief moment yesterday, the Marines appeared to be finally moving north, past Iraqi villages, under the road sign to Baghdad. But then they were ordered to turn around and go back to the place they had just left. And here they are staying until this so-called operational pause is over. Bob Woodruff, ABC News, with the Marines in Iraq.
Is visible from miles, even from relatively calm highways. On the city's outskirts, the tension was obvious. British checkpoints were stopping all traffic, men, women, and children out of the car. Families heading toward Basra were getting through, but young Iraqi men were stopped. The British fear some of them may try to join the fight against the coalition. There have been reports the Iraqis have fired on people trying to leave the city.
Approximately 2,000 civilians tried to leave Basra this morning, and they were fired upon and followed by what we term these paramilitary forces that are loyal to the regime.
We saw one man turn himself in. He said he did not want to fight anymore. They took him into custody and they blindfolded him. There's a British checkpoint on the bridge, and the officer on the bridge said, you can't go any further. Basra ahead is just too dangerous. I just want to point out we're still 7.5 miles from Basra, and they're saying it's too dangerous. Pictures from inside the city show Ba'ath Party headquarters totally flattened. A coalition drone aircraft passing overhead was fired on by Iraqi troops. It took a hit and deployed its parachute. Many people still have no clean water in Basra or electricity, and only the barest communication with the outside. Ali Bahaj of Dearborn, Michigan spoke to his family this week. They say Saddam's soldiers are forcing people to stay inside.
The condition over there is terrible over there.
30 miles to the south of Basra, more food aid was delivered today from Kuwait, but the food convoys are going nowhere near Basra, which is still too dangerous. John W.
A U.S. B-1 bomber circled the sky near the Iran-Iraq border before shattering a hillside with a 2,000-pound bomb. All day long, airstrikes shook the mountains here. Special Forces commanders directed a massive ground assault on Ansar al-Islam.
The terrain itself is daunting, the mountainous terrain. The area is fraught with caves, fraught with minefields.
A pilotless drone let Special Forces commanders watch the 200 feet in the air. The plane's camera sent back real-time video of the battlefield. Special Forces teams moved very quickly into the mountains behind me, pushing many of the militants across the border into Iran. But they're still meeting resistance from smaller pockets of fighters, some of them hidden in caves. The fighting was fierce. One Special Forces 12-man team was nearly overrun, and there were several Kurdish fighters killed and wounded. Tonight, the U.S. continued to bomb, trying to prevent militants from escaping over the border to Iran. Jim Shudo, ABC News, with the U.S. Special Forces in northern Iraq.
That thick plume of black smoke behind me has been with us all day. Shortly after we got up this morning, there was a mop gear alert, which meant that we had to put on our gas masks, our full mop suits, gloves and boots. The Air Force had hit a target back there and didn't precisely know what it had hit, and there was fear that there might have been chemicals in the tanks that exploded. The wind is still blowing from north to south, so it was headed, whatever it was, in our direction. This afternoon, I accompanied General Buford Blunt to the town of Al-Kifr, which has been the site of heavy fighting these past few days. You've had tanks, you've had armored personnel carriers, you've had Bradley fighting vehicles going up against what can only be described as dozens of pickup trucks and private automobiles, some of which have been driven at 50 miles an hour, loaded with explosives at the tanks themselves. They've all been blown away before they could hit the tanks. The U.S. 3rd Infantry Division has inflicted huge casualties on the Iraqis, suffering no casualties of their own. Just one bizarre sight, a scene inside a barber shop. Amid the chairs, the shaving brushes, there is a wall-size poster of Lower Manhattan with the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center still standing.
101st Airborne's Aviation Brigade just about 4 hours ago completed its first deep attack using its Apache attack helicopter, specifically the Apache attack longbow helicopters. They attacked the Medina Division, a Republican Guard unit southwest of Baghdad, just about 100 miles southwest, in the vicinity of 100 miles. I can't actually be very specific because of operational security about exactly where they were. They hit some APCs, some tanks, a lot of other armored vehicles, and returned back here. This is the second of these kind of attacks, deep attacks, using the Apache attack helicopters, where they go out and seek out targets with helicopter gunships in a week, since the 11th Attack Regiment did one just earlier in the week. I think it was Monday. So, but it didn't happen completely without mishap. All the pilots returned safely, but there were two crash landings, if you will. First, when the first helicopter, one of the first helicopters took off, it went about a mile or a kilometer out, and then returned, which is very uncommon. I was watching it, and it looked like it wanted to land. It actually did land now in what appears to be brownout conditions, and what that means is, and you'll hear a lot about this during this war, is as that helicopter was landing, the dust kicked up from the rotors spinning around. The dust here, the sand on the desert floor is very fine. The dust kicks up, and the pilot can't see, simply can't see anything, and he doesn't know exactly where the Earth is. And what happened was he didn't make a perfect connection, and the helicopter rolled, which is very dangerous, obviously, because it can be, you know, it can kill. But in this case, this is a co-piloted helicopter. One of the pilots, according to the information I have, some of this